Hey guys, it's me, Cupid. I have schizophrenia. So I've decided that I'm gonna try and do a video every week, at least once. I'm gonna try. It's not gonna be like anything major, but I am gonna try and do a pretty significant video today. Today we're gonna talk about dopamine. Something that I don't think a lot of people know when they have schizophrenia is that a major cause of the positive symptoms of schizophrenia is high levels of dopamine. That means that our brains naturally produce more dopamine than someone else's brain does. High levels of dopamine can be found in people who are bipolar, the manic part of bipolar. It can be found in people who have addictions. It can be found in a lot of different things. So there's definitely paranoia, there's a lot of different things. So it's definitely something that we have to take into consideration because it can cause anyone to have issues. There are things that can cause higher levels of dopamine, which people probably don't know. There are things that can help to lower dopamine. We do need dopamine in our brain. There are things that can happen if you don't have dopamine in your brain, and that is something that we also need to take into consideration, because without dopamine we can become very depressed and lethargic and all kinds of bad things. So we do need to have dopamine, but with too much dopamine there are issues too. So we need to have a balanced amount of dopamine in our brain. So there are some things that I wanted to go over, things that cause too much dopamine. So I'm going to start with that. So something that causes too much dopamine, probiotics. I know that seems very unusual, but probiotics can actually higher your levels of dopamine. So be careful. I'm not saying don't take them, just be careful. If you need to take them, maybe take something else that lowers your dopamine at the same time. Because I know probiotics are necessary in certain circumstances for certain things. Let's see. So this one's very stupid. It really is not something that you're probably ever gonna use, but Mucuna pruriens. It's a tropical bean, native to parts of Africa. So unless you're in Africa, Africa, India, or southern China, you're probably not going to run into this. But if you are, this is something that can raise dopamine, so be careful with that as well. Ginkgo biloba. I know a lot of people probably take this as a supplement. I don't know if a lot of people with schizophrenia do, but I know a lot of people do take this. It does help with things like anxiety and things like that, as far as what I know. But you do have to be careful because it raises dopamine. So there's a lot of things that help with anxiety that you may use that actually can raise dopamine. Well, when you lower your anxiety, it can actually make you feel better. And when you feel better, it usually raises dopamine. Now, sometimes that means just a little bit, but sometimes that also means a lot. So we have to be careful. Certain things we have to be very careful with. So just be aware of that. Curcumin, it's an ingredient in turmeric. I think some people know that, maybe not. That is something that we also have to be careful of. Oregano. So, I mean, I use oregano regularly, but if you have too much oregano in your diet, you're probably going to have issues. I do use it regularly. It's just a little bit of a seasoning to my food, but not anything excessive. So I think if you're not doing it excessively, you'll be fine. Magnesium. This is something that I was taking regularly for anxiety. It was really helpful for anxiety, but then when I realized that it was actually causing my dopamine levels to get too high, that was when I was like, okay, this needs to stop. And again, if you're someone who already has a balanced amount of dopamine, it doesn't matter. But if you're someone who is schizophrenic and has high levels of dopamine, and this isn't everyone with schizophrenia, not everyone with schizophrenia has high levels of dopamine. This is just a common cause of the positive symptoms. And I know people probably don't remember what positive symptoms are. I do have a video on that. Positive symptoms include hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, and some other things. So those are the kinds of things. If you experience those, most likely, it's very common that you may have high levels of dopamine. So not necessarily, but yes, most likely. So you do have to be careful. Yes, magnesium can raise your dopamine, and it may raise it too much. Again, if you have something like schizophrenia, your levels are already high. So unless you're taking something that is lowering them enough, that magnesium won't raise it too much, then you probably want to stay away from it. Again, medicines do actually lower your dopamine. Not all of them. A lot of them do. Most antipsychotics have that ability to lower your dopamine. And that's, you know, one of the things that they found works for people with schizophrenia. So if you're taking medication, you may still be able to take magnesium or some of these other things. Just be careful. Again, sometimes the medication stops working. Sometimes the medication is not working enough that you need, that, you know, it would lower your dopamine when taking something like magnesium. So just be careful. Green tea. I love green tea, so this was really frustrating for me. I adore green tea, especially matcha green tea. It's like my all-time favorite tea, one of them. It raises dopamine, and it's common for caffeine to probably raise a little bit of dopamine, but green tea can probably be a little bit too much. It has a little bit more caffeine than anything else, usually. So you do have to be careful. Again, doing something fun can raise your dopamine, but it doesn't necessarily raise it too much, okay? There are things that you could be doing randomly that'll raise your dopamine. Again, it doesn't mean that it will raise your dopamine too much. You just have to be careful of certain things that might raise it too much. Vitamin D. I actually had to stop taking vitamin D. I started taking vitamin D when I was depressed, because it's supposed to actually help with depression, getting you out of that funk. Because vitamin D is like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's good for people who are in a dark cloud. So I started taking it, and I was taking a good amount because I was in a very dark cloud. And then I found out later on that, because I started having issues, and I was having major issues, and I was taking multiple things, not just vitamin D, but I was taking multiple things that I didn't know could cause my dopamine to go high. And I just kept having issues and kept having issues. And if I didn't know any better, I would have just upped my medication, or had my doctor up my medication, or whatever, certain things like that. It would have just been, I have no idea what's going on. You know, I have no idea what was the issue. I wouldn't have if I hadn't have done my own research. And of course, I learned all about this because I am studying psychology. So I learned a lot of this from the information that I've already been studying, and then also in my own research. So if I didn't know any better, I would have just had my medication upped and, you know, probably still had issues or whatever. Until they finally found something that settles. But if you know this is why, you don't necessarily need to raise your medication. And that's something that I think that people do need to take into consideration, because we're going to constantly be upping our medication if we don't know about what is causing the issues. If we don't know enough about how our brain works, we're not going to be able to stop the causes of our issues. And I think that's why this video is so important, because I want you guys to be able to take care of yourselves without having to constantly up your medication, or trying to figure out the right amount of medication, or the right formula of medication, what meds work with what meds, or whatever, you know, the whole shebang. If you've been mentally ill for most of your life, you probably know this stuff, because it's something you have to deal with regularly, because medications stop working, things stop going the way you need them to, and you have to like change your medications again, and it happens. But this could prevent that from happening again, because what if it didn't stop working, but that instead you were taking something that caused your dopamine to get too high? So again, this is helpful information. So fish oil is really good for your body. So I'm not saying don't take it, but just remember that if you take it, you probably need to take something with it to make your dopamine levels lower. And I'm going to talk about the things that can lower your dopamine in a little bit too. But fish oil is something that you should definitely not take all by itself, because it'll raise your dopamine. Again, I talked about this earlier, caffeine can raise your dopamine. Caffeine, we have it every day, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Just try not to have too much caffeine, okay? I know that we all need to wake up, but too much caffeine might cause your dopamine to get too high. Ginseng, I don't think a lot of people use that, so I don't think it's that worrisome. If you're into Chinese medicine, you might use it a little bit more. But that's something that can raise your dopamine. Berberine, I don't know how to pronounce that. That is extracted from plants and herbs, so I don't think a lot of people use that. Yeah, it's Chinese medicine again, so that's something else. So those are things that can raise your dopamine. I want to talk about now things that can lower dopamine. So I think that this is important, because I could save it for another video, because I'm already 12 minutes into this video. But I think that it is important for you guys to know this now and not have to wait until another day to hear about this information, or to have to click on another video. So if you're still with me, this is things that can help to lower dopamine. So prescription drugs, I think I talked about this, can raise your dopamine. Certain prescription drugs. This is something that we also have to take into consideration. It's not just like illegal drugs that you find on the street, because illegal drugs on the street can raise your dopamine. That can cause other issues. We already know that. But that can also cause more issues. Even marijuana raises dopamine, which is why it's not usually a good thing for people with schizophrenia to smoke, because it'll cause more hallucinations, more delusions, more paranoia, things like that. That is the reason you're not supposed to, because it raises dopamine. That is the only reason. So, I mean, that is specifically why it causes those issues. There are other things that that can raise dopamine. I don't know all of the prescription drugs. This is something that we probably will have to look up on our own. If you're getting a new prescription drug for something like I don't think commonly that we will, but say you get something for ADHD, that is something that they list here. If you get a medication for ADHD on top of your schizophrenia, that can actually raise dopamine, which will actually cause more issues with your schizophrenia. Most people don't, most doctors, I would say all, hopefully, don't actually prescribe something for ADHD when you have schizophrenia though, so you should be safe. But there are other things like pain medicines. Some pain medicines can raise your dopamine. There are things like that. I don't know all of the drugs again, but if you look up your medication and ask in Google, does this raise dopamine? It should come up with some information. Most of the time it will tell you whether it raises dopamine. That's how I found most of my information about the things that I've been taking. So you can find that information out. just remember, be careful what you do take, because if your doctor, your regular doctor, doesn't know about your diagnosis, your mental illness, schizophrenia, they're probably not going to know that you need, they, even if they do know about it, they're probably not going to know, because they don't know about the brain the way that your psychiatrist might. They're not going to know that that medicine will raise dopamine, which will cause your issues. Some psychiatrists won't even tell you those things. Like, they'll just let you take those medications. I've found that it seems like it's not actually something that they're going around telling us. This can raise dopamine, so you got to be careful. You know, they don't really go around telling us that stuff. So other causes of high dopamine levels, so stress can negatively affect your dopamine. Lack of sleep. I don't know if it raises or lowers it, but these are things that can affect it. So yeah, there's just normal things. Caffeine and sugar can raise dopamine. Energy drinks, we know this. Let's see. So how to decrease dopamine naturally. So these are things that so first one, Bacopa. I have been using that regularly, and that was my life savior. It's also known as Brahmi, and there are articles that I can show you that show proof. They're journals and what do you call, scholarly articles that I don't know if you guys know what that is. Hopefully you do. That actually talk about how Brahmi has helped schizophrenia. Brahmi, Bacopa, they're both the same thing. So it is an Ayurvedic medicine that has been used for centuries, and it is really helpful. So I do recommend that if you are having issues, even still on your medication, try taking Bacopa or Brahmi. They're the same thing, again. Try taking it. It will help. It'll be good to take on top of your medication. And I don't like to promote this, but if you're not taking medication, here's something you can try to get rid of your high levels of dopamine that are probably causing you issues without medication. So that is a really good one. White mulberry, I know that doesn't seem very common. You could probably find it in a supplement. That's something that can lower dopamine. Tryptophan and 5-HTP can both lower dopamine. Tryptophan I actually have as well. I have it as a backup in case my Bacopa is not working at the time, because again, you can raise your dopamine by just having a really fun day. So if I have a bad day, I'm gonna take a little bit of an extra. You know, not a bad day. If I have a good day, a really excessively good day, and it causes my dopamine to get really high, then I'll end up having a bad day, right? So what I do is I take the tryptophan on top of my Bacopa. 5-HTP is something that is very common for mood balance, but all of these are actually common for mood balancing. So Bacopa has been known to mood balance. Tryptophan has been known to mood balance. Tryptophan also helps people sleep. It's commonly found in turkey. So that's why people get tired after Thanksgiving. Of course, not everyone that watches my channel has Thanksgiving, so I do understand people come from other countries when they watch. But that is why people get tired after Thanksgiving or after having turkey. Lemon essential oil also helps to lower dopamine. Again, this is not like lowering it excessively. This is lowering it to balance it. So it helps to balance your dopamine. If you do take an excessive amount, you probably will end up lowering it too much. But balancing your dopamine doesn't mean that, these things normally, with the right dosage, would balance your dopamine. Noni fruit, that doesn't seem very common either, but it does help to lower dopamine. Magnolia bark, that's something that you can find as a supplement, I'm pretty sure, or an oil. again, that's another Chinese medicine. There's a lot of these that are known to be in Chinese medicine. In Chinese medicine, they have had a lot of really good researched things that can help things like mental illnesses on top of physical illnesses. So there's some really good research into that, if anybody ever wants to look into that. Licorice root. Vitamin B6 can also help to lower your dopamine, or balance your dopamine, I should say. Balance your dopamine, because that is actually better. It can help to balance your dopamine. So I think that's about it. I'm sure there are more. I wouldn't doubt that there are probably more things. But these are kind of like the basic things that will probably be the best, because they do help to balance rather than just lower your dopamine. So that is the video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope this was helpful. I really felt like you guys needed to hear this information. I know that it helped me to feel normal again, I guess. I don't really know if there's a such thing as normal, but it helped me to not have the issues anymore. Knowing this information, I was able to prevent more issues from happening, and I want to be able to help people prevent these issues from happening to them too. I think once you have this information, you are more able to control symptoms of schizophrenia. Of course, this doesn't include negative symptoms. Negative symptoms have a whole different thing. People do say that glycine helps to control the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. However, the problem is that glycine can also raise dopamine levels, so you do have to be careful. What is most important to you? Would you rather not have negative symptoms or rather not have positive symptoms? Just remember that you can also help to get rid of negative symptoms by not having the positive symptoms. Sometimes it can help, doesn't always, so I don't want to get your hopes up. But I felt the most important thing for me was not having the negatives or the positive symptoms. I still, obviously, right, I have issues with my negative symptoms, you know, speech, memory, things like that. Those are all things that go into the negative symptoms. So I felt, again, more important, positive symptoms. So I think that's up to you guys, and I think that it is important that we all kind of know this information so that we can control. Again, repeating myself now. I apologize. I am rambling now. Have a great day, you guys. Stay wonderful and stay safe. I hope you guys are all well. Peace.